It is top of the hour, so welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. One of our coffee break technology series, something we have started during the pandemic, just an opportunity to not PowerPoint people to death, but give you an opportunity to meet some of the different team members that we have within our organization, as well as just cover some important topics that folks are thinking about. So we do these every couple of weeks, and then we have our thought leadership series, which we'll talk about. We're focused around budgeting this time of year. We do this kind of every year in this time window, because this is a typical window where you would start maybe doing some of your planning and budgeting if you run on a calendar year for your fiscal. And one of the major areas that come up and we get lots of questions about is technology budgeting. So today we're going to have just a quick conversation and show you just a pair of slides that we have about IT budgeting. But then there's going to be a follow-up that we'll talk about, which is with Gordon Flesch Company Inc.'s new CFO, Kelly Dolphin, who's going to be running a thought leadership series that you're really going to want to attend, that goes into what's unique about this year from a financial and planning perspective, given what's gone on with the macro level economy, how GFC has responded to that, and recommendations from an organization that sees a lot going on within the industry in the Midwest, given our size and reach. So with that, we'll move on to introduce myself and my other co-panelist today, a longtime employee and friend of mine, Josh Moore. So I'll lead off and introduce myself, and then Josh, if you want to introduce yourself after that. So my name is Paul Hager. I'm the Director of Solutions here at Levity. Levity is the new brand name, brand that we launched during the pandemic around elevating your security. So Levity came up from the evolution of elevated security, and you can see our logo is kind of a mountain. It's our Everest that we rally around internally, but we are really here to help our customers climb their digital transformation mountains in their own business, help transform them. I'm the former owner and CEO of Information Technology Professionals. We were acquired March 1st by Gordon Flesch Company Inc., where this brand comes from. So I've been in the technology and leadership industry for 15, 20 years now. Have run businesses, have bought and sold businesses, have been chief technology officers of businesses, and act as a CIO consultant for some of our customers as well, where we're challenged with helping people build budgets and perfect budgets and share those up the way. In addition to hopefully a good dialogue that Josh and I will have, where we have some questions, we're going to kind of bounce between the two of us. We want to hear your questions as well. So go ahead and use the Q&A that's inside of the webinar, and we'll gather those questions up. And kind of when we get gabbing through our kind of preset questions that we kind of asked around the office, that what people think they might want to have answered on a call like this, we want to get to yours and answer those as well. So feel free to pop those into the Q&A as we go along. Josh, want to introduce yourself this morning? How are you doing, Josh?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks, Paul. Good morning, everybody. Looking forward to sharing my thoughts on strategy and technology budgeting. So a little bit of my background. I've worked on the other side of the desk for most of my career, mid-market organizations in retail, healthcare, aerospace, manufacturing, mid-market, 700 plus users. So I'm used to, tightly integrating with people across the organization, executive all the way down to, critical managers across the organization to assemble these budgets and strategic plans. In my current capacity with Levity, I provide CIO advisory services for many of our organizations, and dealing directly with these topics that we're going to be discussing today. So looking forward to, discussing all these topics and having your questions boil up so we can discuss them. So.
Great. Well, like I shared, we try to keep these coffee breaks really conversational between a couple of panelists and try not to make this another Friday morning PowerPoint for you. But two slides that I did want to share that we've kind of designed, and we have a kind of a pack of resources that we've developed over our consulting time. And I'll share a little bit about those towards the end. And then anyone who's joining this or registered, we're going to send you these templates that I'm going to share later, which includes an IT budget template, as well as a strategic plan and a kind of business and IT alignment document as well. So these are resources that we use with customers, and we want to share those with you. So whether you choose to interact with us or not, hopefully not only do you get some really valuable thoughts and conversations and ideas from today, but we're also going to send you away with some tangible tools and templates that you'll be able to bring back to your own business. And whether you're a small business with only a few people and a single owner to convince, maybe you are the owner, or you're part of a larger organization that has levels of leadership, their principles around some of the steps to good IT budgeting are very similar. So this is kind of our little slide that we share with strategic customers of ours around budgeting processes that aren't good. So this is the, oh shoot, we're building a budget and IT is just a cost center that we need to plan for whatever pain you're going to try to convince me I need to spend money on. So I'm going to give you a couple of weeks where you're going to submit to me all the things that you say that we need to spend money on. And then, the budget process goes on without you as the IT leader or the person responsible for IT within your organization. And the reason why this, not only do we see this as common, which is unfortunate, often this approach is going to net you not good results. It's not going to be well aligned, and it's going to result in IT being viewed as just something that has to be paid for, and where everything that is being suggested to move the business forward strategically with IT as a weapon is just relegated to this very do we have money for it? What can we tell them to cut or not cut or do or not do? Josh, any comments to share on the problematic timeline and things that you have seen? Obviously, don't share any customers that we walked in the door and this was what they had going on before us. But thoughts on this graphic and
yeah,
what
completely agree that this is one of the pitfalls I see at a lot of organizations where it's basically presented to that executive staff of a list of needs without any business case surrounding them, no real value proposition, and when executives make decisions about IT projects purely based off of a financial decision, then you're just going to be viewed as a cost center rather than a strategic partner to the business and being able to represent the organization's needs by moving that technology ball forward. So I agree.
Yeah, it reminds me of, there's a really common and great business book. I think it's by Simon Sinek called Start With Why, about the why people show up to work every day. And I when I see this going on, I often want to say to the people that we're trying to consult with, sometimes infrastructure managers or directors of IT, and we'll suggest to them, where's the why in this? So you need $100,000 in Meraki switches. You need $5,000 in new desktops. Why? What does that return to the business? If you're putting things forward without an understanding of alignment to a business outcome, then do not be shocked when your projects don't get approved.
And to add on to that real quick before you dig into this slide, it's important for those executives as you go through the budgeting process to not only know the value of the things that you're going to do, but what are the risks associated with what you're not going to do? And that's what gets shortcut as well. So
Yeah, no, that's a good thought. Yeah, what is the opposite side of not doing it? So what does a better IT budgeting process look like? And I think it can be much longer than this. And we'll kind of get to the timing discussion. I know, Josh, you're a proponent of kind of a year-round budgeting approach, which is certainly true, right? You don't just establish a budget and then walk away from it. You need to establish a budget and then follow that guidance on a month-by-month or quarter-by-quarter basis and judge yourself against it, is a part of good business planning and fiscal responsibility. But so whether this needs to start in September or whether this really needs to start in July to get through or meet the expectations of the business, I think what we're trying to highlight here is, and it's in a note in the upper left here, but it's even more critical to highlight it than it shows here. But have you established what the goals and objectives of the business are and how IT is going to align to those? That has to be done first. But once you have that, then you can start to put together a draft of what those recommendations would look like. You build a strategy document, you get agreement on what the strategy and what good IT looks like, and then you start to drop into the budget the steps and maybe financial investments that need to go along the way. And those are always presented with context and with business alignment. It has a time for multiple meetings to review and explain and get alignment, whether it's a CFO or a controller or an office manager. Again, your size does not change what the mini steps are that are in here. And then there is alignment between finance and IT, and that's presented to ownership ultimately for the decision. And hopefully you're successful and able to align to that. Josh, your comments?
yeah, and as you go through the process, important to give yourself enough time to be able to, and this will probably come up in some of the questions we address as the panelists, but to some of the best information that you can capture to be able to understand areas of elimination of waste, process improvement, better leveraging systems that are already in place. These can happen in interviews with business unit leaders across the organization, right? So always include time to make sure that you're being collaborative and inclusive across the entire organization. Once you bring that up to the executive staff and you're presenting your findings and recommendations to them for the next fiscal year budget, that'll only help give credence to what you've discovered and give good insights along the way.
Yeah. So what would your recommendation be, Josh? Kind of for when you should start considering your technology budget during a fiscal year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that 3 months gives you adequate time to be able to finalize all those interviews with the business units, meet with the executives to understand what that strategic roadmap looks like for business objectives. How are you going to grow the organization? And then how is IT going to be able to support those? And let's face it, in IT, whether it's, working on the infrastructure side and uplifting various components, you always want to go to market, look for alternative solution, what's that best fit. On the application side as well, if you're going to be making application changes or you have business partners, you're going to need time to get those proposals back, estimates back, to be able to consolidate that into a budget that can be presented and actually executed too. And the way you will build confidence across the organization is not only creating that budget, but you hit on a little bit earlier, Paul, is what is that governance of that budget? Is it kind of monthly tracking of the various projects and expenditures, operations, or capital that are coming out of IT, so you can kind of align those and say, hey, remember that plan we created and spent all that time? We're actually executing to that. And then, you know, we're all in the business world, right? We saw it in 2020. Things will change, right? Budgets need to be reforecasted. Hey, sometime for the betterment of the business. You know, sometimes it's something that we have to cut back on those costs. With a lot of that information at your fingertips from this budgeting process, you can make those decisions on the fly and change pretty quickly.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. And it varies a little bit based on the size of the organization, right? This process could be longer in a longer organization and shortcut slightly in a small organization.
Yep.
But I definitely want to encourage people to really, obviously, if you're here today joining us, you know, you're obviously curious about how to do IT budgeting right, but kind of regardless of your size, there's some fundamentals to this and being prepared and on top of what it's going to look like for next year. One of the questions that, you know, I get a lot, I don't know if you do, Josh, is, you know, what percentage should our technology represent of our total operating budget, right? If we took our revenue, what is the magic number that I should be going to the business and saying IT should be spending as a percentage of revenue? So what is that exact number, Josh?
Yeah, right. It's something that is different for each organization. You know, we'll come up with a single answer between the two of us, I'm sure. But you know, back in 2018, Deloitte and the Wall Street Journal, you know, published a, you know, what is that average spend per vertical market? And you know, healthcare and their compliance requirements, you know, drives a higher level of percentage of revenue on IT spend, right?
Yeah.
They also need a lot of technology in those operatories versus manufacturing that can be on the low end. So industry vertical can be one part of that component.
Yeah, and it kind of depends where you're at in your cycles, right? You know, I'm always advising customers around whether this is a maintain year or you know, a year where we're investing and making major changes, but then that'll be followed by some more maintaining type years within the budget, because it is cyclical, right? You don't need to buy you know, new major hardware every single year. Depending on kind of where your cycles and rotations are and things like that. But you know, there definitely been some doors we've walked in, and you know, both using industry insight around based on vertical and their size, where their budget should be, and we've definitely walked into some doors where you know, in my professional opinion, there are some underfunded departments, and that is not only causing unnecessary pain, but then, you know, lost productivity and increased risk to the business, which isn't good either. And so sometimes people really want the answer, and you know, if people really push me to it, I think 5% of revenue is a good number to be at. But it certainly, your vertical market and whether you're in you know, an underfunded, maintaining or investing state, I think has a big impact. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, and you hit on it. There's really, you know, three states that an organization is in when it comes to, you know, their spend on IT. They're either underfunded, maintaining, or they're investing IT, and then it becomes a weapon where they can differentiate themselves strategically. And yeah, that percentage definitely changed. I agree that 5% is a safe number to make sure that, you know, IT is a strategic partner. But there's other factors as well, right? You know, if you have a lot of older equipment and, you know, things are breaking down and it's costing a lot in user productivity, you know, and kind of on that underfunded side, you know, you might be actually spending more money, but be perceived as underfunded. So, you know, a lot of those investments should look at how can we eliminate waste? How can we improve user productivity? You know, a lot of it starts, in my opinion, by really establishing some of the criteria for how you're going to be strategic in the organization and meet those business goals. So, but yeah, I think that 5% is a good number to make sure that you're moving the ball forward.
You used one of those phrases that people hear sometimes. Talk about IT as a strategic weapon. What sort of investment levels do you see? Meaning you've hit that IT as a strategic weapon concept or level.
Yeah, so I mean, what you really want to see in the budget is, kind of what is going to be lights on, maintaining the status quo in IT, and then you also want to see a list of projects that are really built to enhance that user experience, eliminate waste, improve user productivity. What does some of those look like? They could, look like definitely a server upgrade could be a part of it, right? If that's an aging infrastructure. But a lot of those application investments and, moving applications to the cloud to take advantage of new features and functionality, consolidating of applications to eliminate some of your expenses around cloud cost, licensing, eliminate complexity, finding areas where there's duplicate data entry across systems to be able to eliminate some of those. These are the projects that you want to see on a budget that are really going to start to differentiate you versus your competition, right? Because when you talk about IT being a strategic weapon, that's really what you want, right? You're in a marketplace. There's other people that have competing products and services. How are we going to be better than those other organizations? The other part of it is, collaboration tools, especially in a year with a pandemic, right? We've come to really value being able to connect with customers over collaboration. Well, that can be expanded in a lot of ways to really improve that customer experience, which will be a huge differentiator for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, definitely the pandemic, I would agree, has applied some pressure to that, and apply pressure in new ways, right? Were you prepared for and ready for a world in which IT had to become really agile and work? And those who had maybe leaned into cloud and remote technologies already were maybe a little better positioned to be able to make that transition. Certainly had a lot of conversations with customers about technologies like Microsoft Teams and other remote collaboration tools. And, luckily I had a number of customers that, we had prepared for that directionality just because that's where the industry was moving. And, it set them up to be in a position to be agile enough to make this adjustment and continue operations and, as low impacted of a way as possible. We're delivering this from downtown Madison, Wisconsin today. And it's, it regionally, the pandemic has had different impacts, and it definitely changes the dynamic, and technology has just played a huge part of that in whole new ways. And in a lot of ways, I hope it's helped see the business need for IT maybe in new ways, and the need for that investment and that constant invention, and just doing it the way that we've done it before. And we've always given people a desktop because that's what we've always given Sally at the front desk. Those ideas can be challenged maybe in new ways now.
Yep. And I do think, and tying this back to the initial discussion about budget, those projects, and as you're looking to undertake these things, it's important to work with those business leaders across the organization to really build business cases, right? And challenge them. Make sure they're thinking about, hey, if we make this change, what is that internal effect going to have for productivity? How is this going to impact our customer experience when consuming our services or our goods? And that can really help the CFO work with you to quantify what are those value proposition projects that are really going to feed into IT being a strategic weapon.
Yeah. You've mentioned a number of names. Who should be involved in this IT budget process, and kind of what expectations should you have of their involvement and their contribution to the steps in this cycle?
Yeah, so I really believe that, IT needs to have a seat at that executive table. And if the CFO is purely talking for IT, maybe he's not able to articulate fully all the risks or rewards based off of these things. So it's important to be there. It's important to include, chief operations officer, obviously chief financial officers, CEOs, smaller organization, those roles are still there. Maybe it's a single body covering operations and finance, but that senior leadership obviously is a critical group to be in front of and collaborate with. As far as other users in the organization, kind of depends on the size. But those key middle managers, right? If you have an engineering department, it's that engineering manager. You'll have a production facility. Maybe it's that production manager. Sales is also important because they interface with the customer a good deal. So really, kind of laying out what are those critical processes across the business that make up your good or service, and be inclusive. You would be surprised that even if their projects don't get approved in the next fiscal year, that they just like understanding that they have an ear with IT, right? Or IT has an ear, and they're willing to listen and hear their ideas. And sometimes those ideas can feed into pretty quick wins, right? If there's a low hanging fruit and there's already a system that they didn't maybe know about, great, we can just turn that up. So I think those are kind of the framework of the people that I would include.
Yeah, I've also found it helpful, those discussions with end users and getting down into the business level, and maybe some departmental managers, that's where I found some shadow IT stuff going on as well. Just
Yep.
they're using 3 different systems when we already have one, and those are opportunities for sometimes even cost reduction or consolidation, which then can continue to fund leaning into more strategic areas in other parts of the business as well. And that just gets lost when IT is planning, kind of devoid of some of the voice from the business side.
Yep. And you know what? Make those middle managers across the organization work a little bit for IT. Coming out of those things, ask them, doing these things, could you provide me a rough estimate on how much it would save and cost for the organization, or what kind of, and give them some homework and revisit with them. It's a good way to make sure that you're getting alignment across the organization. So
yeah. Well, we want to give people time for their questions as well. One of the last questions that we get a lot that I think we wanted to just chat about quick was, let's talk about, some of the upgrade cycles for technologies, laptops and servers and switches and things. How can companies proactively time their purchasing cycle to, minimize large cash years, or, but you still obviously need to, there is a life cycle to these devices, and again, pandemic year, maybe not being on top of like a laptop refresh cycle might have caught your business a little bit off guard. Need to give employees the tools they need to be effective and do their jobs. What are some of those life cycles look like? What do you think, Josh?
yeah, desktops, I believe that 4 years is kind of a serviceable life cycle of the desktop. Moore's technology law, not mine, but the other Moore. Every 2 years, technology doubles. So that can really help with productivity as well as eliminating potential failures. Same things on the laptops, except, I'd go with a 3-year cycle, just from the standpoint of those devices are traveling around a bit, tend to get beat up pretty bad. And those users that are using laptops tend to be, more power users and things like that. For infrastructure components, switches, firewalls, and the servers, storage, things like that. It depends. A lot of manufacturers sell 5-year warranties for a reason, and some organizations do that. But hey, your strategic initiatives and growth plans and trajectory might dictate that you have to replace those things every 3 years. So it's definitely something that you want to keep on top of. As far as really avoiding the whole capital out cycle and all of a sudden having 1 year that's very painful. What I've found a lot of organizations doing, and this transition has been happening over the last 10 years. But nowadays I walk into a lot of businesses and they've adopted it, is moving to an operating model, right? And then all of a sudden you have a predictable monthly cost to your IT environment. And you can assign, hey, if we need another server, this is going to be the monthly cost for that server, even if it's a virtual machine. Or we have to add one more user. Well, here's the IT cost associated with just adding one more user. So I think that really helps a lot of organizations avoid the peaks and valleys of IT capital spending. Of course, there's going to be times where you have to capital out, but trying to minimize that helps make IT spending predictable.
Yeah, I would agree. Lots of creative ways to use financing. I think people sometimes have a weird reaction to talking about leasing, as if it's kind of a statement that they can't afford to pay for things up front, which really isn't what it's about. It's about how do you best utilize capital within your business.
Yep.
And there are some things that there's some great vendor offerings too. Not only does GFC have some fantastic financing and leasing options, because we literally have our own leasing company, so we're notably a little biased there. But at times we have vendors, Cisco and some others, that have some programs where you're only leasing 80% of the value of the device and able to continue to roll that into an operational expense within their business. And these are good things to, as you start talking with the finance side of the organization, talking about ways that renting access versus buying and depreciating, where that hits the balance sheet in different ways, and how that affects EBITDA and other things that you may run your business off of. This is where IT can really, again, continue to show its value by being at a seat at the table on the financial side and find ways to operationalize or capitalize the right parts of IT. But would agree on just some basic life cycle pieces to it. Laptops definitely last much shorter than they used to, especially now. They're traveling more, getting beat up more, dropped, lost, things like that. Which is another reminder to maybe accidental damage, or some additional warranty coverage, which people you say warranty coverage and people have bad thoughts about car salesmen selling them extended warranties. But there are times where, particularly now, as devices are more mobile, those could be good financial decisions for the organization versus having bursted higher costs and things like that within the organization. But it's lining these up, right? We talked about that investing years and maintain years. Worked with organizations that they do servers 1 year, switches 1 year, storage 1 year, desktops the next, and kind of stay in a rotation. There's always one big project. You can also take a third of your desktop or laptop fleet. You could also have one big year, put it on a lease, knowing that 3 years down the road, you're just going to roll the lease and you'll get all new gear, or hardware as a service. There's lots of ways to handle this, and I don't think there's 100% right way or wrong way. But it's, again, getting IT at that table to start having some of those financial conversations, because obviously things need to be paid for, but there are ways to do that that are more aligned to the business and not aligned to the business, where it feels very reactionary and very, well, I hired two people. Oh, you hired two people. Well, that puts us into this tier of licensing over here, and we don't have any extra devices, and those are 45 days away. And it's IT becomes reactionary and a cost center again. So one of the before we go to Q&A, I just wanted to share just a couple of the resources that we're going to be able to share with everybody here today. First, we're going to start off with some documents, kind of templates in both Word and Adobe format for what does good IT look like. And you'll see we kind of have some commentary on it, but things are all fillable. And again, we'll send them in multiple formats. But we start with corporate goals and how are you aligning to those goals, increase in revenue, increase in average order size, things like that. What their expectations are around service delivery, uptime, acceptability. Do they want 4 nines or 5 nines of uptime? What is their RTO or RPO target? So that's the recovery time objective after a security or disaster event, and the recovery point. How soon or how recent of a data set do you want to be able to go back to? Do you want to be able to go back to 5 minutes ago at any point? Well, that's a different budget cycle. It's a whole different budget animal versus if you can tolerate losing a week's worth of data. And those can be different RTOs and RPOs based on different applications and critical layers within the business. So we're trying to start with getting consensus on what good IT looks like. And this seems like this is maybe like, we don't need to do this. We all know what good IT looks like. Well, actually, rarely do we meet a business where if we sit their 5 top leaders in the organization around the table and ask them what good IT looks like, you will get 5 different answers to that. And you need to get alignment on that. Then we can kind of translate that into a strategic IT plan, the time horizons of what good IT looks like. Again, aligning to that corporate strategy, always aligning back to the business and what that will look like. And then the initiatives that will support that strategy and the impact that will have on the business. So a lot of times IT is going to be able to do things like reduce cost or improve the business capacity to be able to grow. And we want to align all the way back to that to show that, investments in those portions of IT will also return to the business. Some comments here on strategy and just guiding you through the initiatives and the IT systems that'll be required, the timeline, resources, and costs for those initiatives from an IT perspective. And this we copy and paste and draw from our budget template that we're going to share with folks as well. So a multi-tabbed template that just walks you through software maintenance and renewals, software and hardware that may be needed or equipment that may be needed, your technology services, and kind of just reminding you that you have more in your technology budget probably than even the things we're talking about today. It might be your copy and image, your internet and ISPs, your web hosting, your mobile phones and mobile devices, your phone system, your phone service. All of that tends to roll into the IT section of the budget, and we want to make sure we're capturing all of that. Your support from, maybe you have lots of internal IT, maybe you've outsourced it, maybe you're in a hybrid approach. That should all be identified and listed out, and you should be accounting for, fully burdened individuals if you do have internal folks. And then this is where we can get that project list together in a good way, aligned to the business with priorities and timelines. And this is a document that then can live and you're coming back to. So again, a great pack of resources, I think, that we're going to be able to share with folks. And every one of them kind of comes with some guidance along with it. Before we get to opening up for Q&A too, just wanted to remind folks that there's a great thought leadership webinar coming up that really is going to dive into planning and budgeting and getting back to work in a post-COVID world. This will be with, again, GFC's new CFO, Kelly Dolphin, which I think is going to be a great session and worth registering. You can register from the GFlash website, gflash.com/events. And then here is my contact information and Josh's as well. If you have any follow-up questions or want to interact with our organization, maybe you know us from our IT work, maybe you know us from the copier and imaging side, or maybe you're new to being introduced to Levity and Gordon Flesch, and we'd love to have a conversation and find out where we can fit and what role we can have in helping support your business. Any final thoughts, Josh? Will we give people time to enter in a few questions here into the open Q&A section? So feel free to put them through the chat or pop up the Q&A within the Zoom webinar. But any closing thoughts, Josh, before we head into the weekend or head into people's questions?
No, just kind of echoing what you said about the good IT template. 5 people in a room, everybody's going to have different ideas about good IT. So that alignment is absolutely critical to being able to move forward as an IT organization and be successful. With respect to the budgeting tools, great template. On that projects tab, I encourage some level of measuring the budget that you put forth, on a regular basis. So, maybe for some larger organizations that are, really tightly monitoring costs, it may be a monthly exercise. Otherwise, maybe it's a quarterly exercise. It'll help you gain confidence with executives in the organization that you're being a good steward for their financial investments. Great, agreed.
We'll give people a couple more minutes here to answer questions. It's been a rainy week here in Wisconsin. We have a large number of people on with us today, so thank you all for spending some time with us on this Friday morning. Hopefully you do have a cup of coffee, but give people just a couple more minutes for any questions. Otherwise, we'll give people a few minutes back to their Friday. But hopefully something in today's presentation was helpful or spurred thoughts or comments or questions. And obviously we're here to help, and we want to be a strategic partner to these conversations, and are really comfortable with our own involvement in that. And often I'm doing a budget that's including a large portion of our services and projects inside of those budgets, and that's normal, and we need to be both competitive and strategically aligned within the business. Well, it looks like we did a great job, Josh. We have answered every potential question that anyone may ever have about IT budgeting, and we did it all in 48 minutes. So well done, Josh. Thanks for joining me this morning. Thank you to everybody who joined us today. Again, we will send recordings, copies of presentations and resources and all those great things. Our fantastic marketing team will follow up. But if anything else comes up, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're here to help. I hope everybody has a wonderful and safe weekend. If we don't hear from you, take care.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.